So in the last lesson I gave you an overview of Code Sandbox and how to use it, and in this lesson we're actually going to move on to an introduction to React. So I've forked the project from our last lesson and I've just renamed it as Introduction to React, and I'll leave a link to this in the description notes by this lesson. Okay, so let's get started with React, and the best way to do that is to take a look at the homepage. So React is a JavaScript library for building user interfaces. So it is a super popular framework, probably the most popular UI framework at the moment, so more popular than Angular and Vue, and it's great for building component-based features and UIs that can be reused across projects. So React is a front-end framework, so it can commonly be used with Node.js, which often serves as your backend, and it is also commonly compiled with compilers such as Webpack and Babel, which also run off Node.js. But React does not directly depend on Node.js, so do keep that in mind. It is a front-end framework. So we will take a closer look at Webpack in a future lesson, and we will also cover off Babel in this lesson as well. So let's get started, and in this lesson we're going to write some React in the client, and more specifically in our index.html file of this project. So we're not going to be using our src folder at all, so I'm just going to remove this and just remove reference to it in our script tags. So we're just going to be loading the React library into our HTML file, loading Babel, and then writing out our first bit of JSX. So on the getting started page, I'm just going to go to try React and add React to a website. And we're just going to follow along with this tutorial. It'll only take a couple of minutes, but should give you a good introduction about how to use the library. So the first thing it's telling us to do here is add a DOM container to the HTML. So we need a HTML element which is going to act as basically the entry point for our React code, just like using any other JavaScript library. We need to assign that to a HTML element. And in our case, we have a div with an ID of app, so we're going to be use that as our entry point, and React is going to render its code to this element. So our React component is going to display in this div. Okay, next up we can add the script tags and actually loading the library. So we're going to load React and React DOM into our project. So I'm just going to copy and paste, and I'll make this a little bit smaller so you can just see that. So we're loading React and React DOM, so the two libraries we need for getting started with React. Now we're also going to need Babel. So Babel converts JSX into vanilla JavaScript syntax that our browser will understand. So without Babel, the browser is not going to know what to do with the JSX syntax and won't be able to compile it. So if you go to babeljs.io, there's some details on what Babel is. So it's a JavaScript compiler for using next generation JavaScript, and it converts it to browser compatible JavaScript that our browser is going to understand. So let's go back to our tutorial. I'm going to skip past step 3 and into this section of try React with JSX, and down to quickly try JSX and just copy our Babel script tag, and we can paste it in here. So we're loading React, React DOM, and then Babel. We also need to tell our script tags that we are in fact using Babel, so we'll set type to text/Babel. And then we can write our first bit of React. So I'm going to create a variable called DOM container, and I'm going to set that equal to documents. So we're accessing our DOM, and we are selecting our app ID element. or our div element with the ID of app. So we're selecting app, and once we've selected it, we can actually use React to render some JSX. So let's access our React DOM library. Notice the capitals, DOM. We're going to use the render method, and we're going to render a div. And that div, we're going to write hello JSX, and we can assign that to our DOM container. Okay, great. Just indent these. So what are we actually doing here? So we're creating a variable called DOM container, which contains the selection of this div with the ID of app, and that is going to be the entry point. That is going to be what we're assigning our React code to. And then we're going to use a method in the React DOM library called render to render our JavaScript code and render our JSX. So this is some JSX syntax. So these div tags and just the text hello JSX, and then we are assigning it to that DOM container. So I'm going to remove this hello world in the body and refresh. And we can actually see this HTML is a funny color, so I think something's gone wrong. If we look at our syntax, we actually need to close this tag. So we're opening our div tag hello JSX and then closing our div tag. And then if we refresh, we'll be able to see hello JSX rendered in our preview. And we can actually open that into a new window as well and see it on our web page. Okay, great. So that was an introduction to React, and we've actually written our first bit of JSX code. And in the next lesson, we're going to be looking at JSX in a little bit more detail.